got anything to report from last week's experimenting?
Yeah. The experiment of being free to experience. I encountered a suggestion from number 5, and I just sat with it, and I noticed something I hadn't observed before, which was there was pain that was going on with the suggestion. I was in a rather good mood, so I was still in a good mood while experiencing this pain from this decision, and I listened to what it was saying beyond the "you should get out of bed," and underneath that it was number 5, and it said, "I try so hard, you know, and I just want to be appreciated, basically. I want to be loved."
You also want to tell very long stories.
And what was seen was that this was a decision that was made by a little kid, and that it didn't understand what it was asking for. And in feeling that the pain that went along with it, there was a feeling of understanding that wasn't just here, but it was in the body and it was in the feeling as well. And when that feeling came, I noticed that it was very different than a lot of other experiences I've called understanding. And it occurred to this one that just like I don't walk and I don't digest food, I don't understand either. That's what X does. And that can only happen when there's information that's reported that I experience, not just that I think about.
Okay, so you formed a theory. You have no idea if that theory is true. That's very obvious. Because you just told a very, very long story. Why do people tell long stories?
Because there's
Because they don't know what the crap they're talking about. Please, leave it as a theory, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to test that theory, then you attempt to prove it wrong. If you don't want to test it, then say, what's yours with it? What is the point in forming a theory to explain that circumstance?
Only to test it and see if it's accurate.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't see you all the time forming theories about everything that happens so you can test it. I don't think that's your motivation, sweetheart. I just don't.
Okay.
What's the motivation? That's what why means.
And to see if I can use the experience to see more about what's going on here and use it and develop an observation, or well, that's the same thing as developing a theory, so I can...
So you're not real sure what the motivation was?
The motivation was so that I could see what was going on and find out if that was accurate.
You need a theory to do that? I need a theory to see what's going on? I thought I could just sort of open my eyes and see what's going on. And then I needed a theory to see what's happening. That's not why you formed that theory. It's not true. What is the motivation for coming up with a theory about that experience?
So that it could be used over again to...
That's exactly right. I liked it. Wasn't that the way it started? This is neat. I like this experience. Isn't that right? I want it again. Isn't that right? It is what you just said.
Right. What was heard was, this is something that was given to you. Are you just going to throw it away? Or are you going to make use of it?
I don't care.
Okay.
I really don't care. Are you trying to tell me that you didn't like it?
No.
So this is an accurate statement. I liked it. Are you trying to tell me that you didn't ever want it again?
No.
So this is an accurate statement. I want it again.
If it happened again, it would be fine.
And very quickly it turned into, I need it.
Okay.
Isn't that right? It went from I like this to I want it to I need it. Now I have to turn it into a problem that has a solution.
Okay.
What if it's a one-time event? What if it's not a one-time event? Well, I don't know that turning it into a problem and coming up with theories that I'm not even going to check out, I'm just going to tell the other people to see if they agree or disagree, is going to help ever create that event again. Maybe your theory's right, I don't know. I had trouble paying attention to that whole story, to be honest with you. It took more work than I was cared to put out. But I can certainly see what's going on. Okay, what the motivation for this whole thing is. Maybe your theory's correct. It's very simple to deal with. You just go and experiment with it in the attempt to prove it wrong. And then you'll know one way or the other. Okay? But it's interesting just to see how a simple little thing got turned into the same old game again.
Mm-hmm.
This is important. I need it. Which says, I will die if I don't have this again.
Right.
And now I'm not okay. I've got another problem that has to be solved. So I start coming up with theories and beliefs and conclusions and ideas and so forth and so on. Okay. What is so bad about saying that I had an experience that I don't understand? It's very hard to come up with a theory with only one observation. I wouldn't even be making theories yet. I'd be interested in getting a lot more observations. I mean, no good scientist makes
An observation of one.
a theory out of one observation. They sort of test it out a little bit to make sure that the observation is even meaningful. Okay, but this is problem solving.
Okay.
This is not the scientific method.
Okay.
This is problem solving. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere, because this experience was a little different than other ones, you decided it must be more valid, and so it's got to be repeated. You don't know that. Maybe it was the onions you had for lunch that day. Who knows? Okay, no problem. If you can do it without making a problem out of it, out of interest, then you can be objective about it, okay?
Okay.
But not when there's a problem to be solved. You cannot possibly be objective. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Lots of my favorite non-artists that I've sort of been living with are like quieter lately.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hear as much and sort of catch them when they start and so forth. But there's one thing that I have not been able to even to deal with. It's like going on 2 or 3 weeks now. Just somebody who lives in anger just like distributed a real big load on me a few weeks ago. And I have not been able to, I hear all kinds of things every time I see or hear anything that reminds me of this person.
Right.
I haven't even seen the person, but
Right.
just the memory of it, that they just take me away. It's
Right.
like there's this feeling of emergency. I think, I'm trying to figure out, it's
What
like
do we say
a
about
threat.
blaming?
I'm sorry?
What do we say about blaming? That once something is blamed, it will stick with me forever?
I don't remember that. Well, it has, so far. It's really
Anytime,
hard.
that's why it's suggested that out of all the not I's, one spend a little bit of extra attention on 6. anything or anyone that I've ever blamed, that stays with me forever. So that out of all the lives, we actually suggest that people spend a certain amount of time going back to the past. It's the only one that will say, don't do it just in the now. Look at everything that has ever been blamed throughout the life, because it's all still here right now. And it will never go anywhere.
Okay.
The account has been set up, that person owes you, so you're now waiting to be paid back.
It's not even passively waiting, it's like constantly
Okay, then
dreaming
you're
up
pursuing
ways.
the debt.
Yeah, it's like the Nadis keep suggesting things to say or do, or
Right.
horrible things.
That's right. That
Over
debt
and
has
over.
to be paid. And it'll be there for the rest of your life.
Gee, that's a lovely thought.
But it's true of all money.
It'll join all the others, yeah.
Yeah. The thing to do is to use this modular thing called understanding. It says, can I see it from this person's point of view? And understand that from their point of view, there is nothing else they could have done, no matter how disturbing it was to me. And that they actually did nothing to me. And then it goes away. That's called forgiving.
Do anything.
Anything else come out of the work for this week?
Well, I resisted the resistance.
Oh, God, I was hoping somebody tried to. Unfortunately, the one person that told me they did that isn't here tonight, so you get to be one of the guinea pigs. What happened?
Well, I don't think I have anything particularly valuable to report. I mean, every time the resistance came up, I didn't want to look at it. So I didn't.
How are you going to tell what happens if you didn't even look at it?
Exactly right.
Okay, well, that was an interesting. Anybody else
Exactly
try
right.
that
I mean,
one?
one of the observations I did make is that when it came up, I would get argumentative and defensive and all that, but that's
But
right.
this is not the experiment that we
That's
want to
correct.
find out. So, anybody else try that experiment? Yeah.
I was trying to think of an experiment to do yesterday. At the same time, I was changing a bunch of sheets from one folder to another, and I tried to do it all at once. So all the holes will line up. I don't have to deal with it. And one of the prongs wouldn't go through, and I was wiggling it, and I got angry, and I tried to force it, and the sheets went everywhere. It occurred to me I just did the experiment.
That's exactly right. It destroyed you and destroyed the sheets.
And put them all back one at a time.
Anybody else try it? Nobody else tried it. I'm telling you, sometimes I wonder why I do this. Do you understand what we've been saying? That your entire purpose of living is to resist resistance? Do you understand that? This is not a rhetorical question.
Yes.
Yes.
Is there anyone who does not understand that? Doesn't see that?
I don't.
I should have known. Then what would be the purpose in ignoring this experiment?
To avoid conflict.
Like
And
pain.
Doesn't even know what the hell we're talking about. You weren't even here.
Yeah, somebody told me what the experiment was.
Avoid pain.
That's why you did it? That's why you didn't do it?
That's why I didn't do it. Well, I had an experience that was what I associated with similar to what the experience.
Let's not tell a story. I want to get some work done here, not have social hour. You
Okay.
can have social hour later, okay?
right.
During the breaks or something.
Okay.
I'm so lazy that you gotta have social hour. If I see that my entire purpose for living is about resisting resistance, about attempting never to have second force to my purpose, And someone comes along and says that doing that destroys you, and suggests that you try it out to find out for yourself whether or not you're destroying yourself. How is it that you don't find this worth doing? I really would like to understand this. This is very interesting, rational process to me. That I have found out for myself that there is one thing that I do all of the time. And some odd person comes along and says, you know what, people who do that destroy themselves completely. They're annihilated as if they never existed. And they say, here's a way to find out if that's true. Now, to me, the most interesting thing that I could do at that point in time would be to find out if that's true. I want to know. One has to really wonder what's going on here. You don't want to know? You don't want to know if you're destroying yourself? Very interesting.
There's a question.
Yeah.
Would you describe active resistance, please?
I just did. What do you call that with active resistance? What do you want to know?
Well, you suggested that we use active resistance, and when I looked at things, they seemed to be contrived or self-imposed or passive. And so figured I'd ask you if you would describe active resistance, because the sheets seem like passive resistance to me.
So, it's just a suggestion. I only suggested that because I thought it would be a lot more demonstrable. It would be a lot more obvious. Just making an effort to make it easier to do. It was just a suggestion. It wasn't, this is the only way you can do it. I take it your phone drawer.
No.
So then this is just an excuse, isn't it? If you really needed that question answered, there's this marvelous invention. It's so weird, but you pick it up and you punch these little numbers in there, and you can talk to anyone, anywhere in the world, at any time almost. This is just an excuse, isn't it? So now, when it's pointed out how incredibly foolish I was, I must come up with an excuse, a justification that says, no, I wasn't foolish.
It was foolish. I assumed I had another week to live and that it wasn't necessary to check it out.
That's exactly right. Okay, any other questions or comments? Now that I've also made you so powerful,
What did you say?
it's now that I've all made you feel really yucky. Let's take another little 5-minute break and then we'll start. Okay. If we look at the picture of man again, without all that gunk in it for a moment. be interesting to see something about the way that things are working. The body senses what is going on in the environment. That sensory experience, believe it or not, is entirely an illusion. I don't want to go into that a lot, but I say a lot of times around here that the senses are not very reliable. Because the fact is, even when they're describing things accurately, when they haven't made some odd little mistake, like thinking that a funny shape off somewhere is something that is not, or sensing something on the body that isn't there, one of those funny little goof-ups that they make, right? They're still telling you that the world is only what you can sense. That's the biggest lie that they tell you, isn't it? They're so strong. The experience of sensing is such a strong thing that we literally do not accept as real anything that cannot be sensed. So the end result of that is that we believe that the world is that which can be sensed. So it's all a lie. Not just a little bit of a lie, it's actually all a lie. The hardest thing for us to do is to discover for ourselves things that cannot be sensed. And there are lots of people who talk about what some of those discoveries are that people can be made. But they only happen under very specific conditions, because you will never, ever be able to prove these discoveries by the senses. You will never be able to make them by using the senses. Only the awareness can make them if it's looking at things in a certain way. It's called being able to sense, experience, or whatever the hell the word is for it, because we don't have it, or see that which is unknown. And that's something that every person can only discover for themselves. There is no one else who can do it for you. Someone else can point these things out. But since you cannot sense them, it does you no good to have them pointed out. They can only be discovered in the midst of seeing and relationships. But at any rate, I'd like to talk about what happens to the sensory information that comes into the body. And that is that as we built up a frame of reference for seeing, which is one of the great gifts that the body has, that is something that it has nothing to do with spirit. It's all physical. And that is that the body has the ability to learn, not the spirit. What the spirit does that might be analogous to learning is something we know very little about. We've had probably almost no experience with it. What we call learning is the fact that the body stores memories. It has the ability to call them up in such a way that they can be repeated, isn't that right? And that's called the frame of reference for seeing. And it is the personality that does this. The personality is a frame of reference, isn't it? Everything that we sense is interpreted by the personality, so we can make sense out of it. When you first got here, nothing made any sense to you. Isn't that right? It was just a jumble of lights, and actually it's all feeling when you come right down to it. Do you know that? It's all a sense of touch. Because everything that happens in the senses is just an organ that is designed to be touched by a particular vibration of energy. Isn't that right? We have one organ that can be touched by a particular vibration that's called light. We have another one that can be touched by another kind of vibration that's called matter. We have another one that can be touched by another kind of vibration that's called molecules floating around in the air. They're all about touching a certain vibration of energy. So really, what we call the five physical senses are really only one kind of sense. What other kinds of senses there are, we're not really very clear about. This is all we know. But this thing called the frame of reference, or viewpoint, or way of making sense out of everything that happens, interprets all the sensory experiences. So when light touches the eyes, we can resolve it into an image. So fast, it's unbelievable, isn't that right? As long as you have experience with what that thing is. If you see something that you have no experience with at all, you have no idea what it is, isn't that right? The frame of reference has no way of calling up a memory and saying, this is what that is. So you have to spend considerable effort turning it from just a bunch of shapes, which you are familiar with, into an actual object that you can do something with. Isn't that right? Because it's not in the frame of reference yet. If you look back on childhood, if you have the memory still accessible, which I guess a lot of people don't, you can remember a lot of those experiences when you were first presented with something and you had no idea what it was, and it took tremendous effort to bring it into the frame of reference so the next time you just recognized it. Just as it took you tremendous effort, let's say, to drive a car. That's probably recent enough that you might even remember it. People told you all about it. You read books on it, you studied it, and then you got to do it, and you weren't very good. Isn't that right? And with tremendous effort, you made sense out of that experience. It went into the frame of reference, and now you, unfortunately, do it without even knowing you're doing it. It's completely unconscious now to drive a car. Most of the time, you don't pay any attention to driving a car. Isn't that right? Little bits of it here and there, but most of it you just do without thinking about it. The personality is actually doing it for you, isn't it? The frame of reference interprets everything that happens based on what it's already experienced, and it drives the car. That was designed to be a helper to us, because as spirit, we do not have the ability to learn in that way. Apparently, whatever our native environment is, which all of us have forgotten, we've become so caught up in this incredibly seemingly real world of the senses that we've forgotten our native environment of spirit. And apparently in that environment, we don't need to learn that way. Whatever learning is in that environment, we really don't know. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but we have no idea what it is. The only learning we know is the learning of the body. It says, I've done this many, many times, and I've made sense out of it. It's in the frame of reference for seeing. So whenever that experience comes up, I can just pull it out of the memory, out of the frame of reference, and say, here's what I know, here's what to report to X as true and valuable, and then it gets done. That's called the frame of reference, okay? This is my world. Not the outer world of the environment. My world actually is the frame of reference. Because everything that is sensed from the environment is interpreted by the frame of reference. I have no idea whether or not what I'm being told about the environment is true or not. Because all of this goes through the not eyes, these various decisions that all interpret it into the chooser, and the chooser tells me what has been experienced. As the awareness function, I no longer know. In fact, if you consider it, you realize that most of the time you don't even know what is being sensed. You don't even pay attention to it. The actual physical experience, most of the time, you don't even know. Unless it's a very strong sensation, You pay absolutely no attention to the actual physical experience, isn't that right? You recognize that? You have to really think hard to say, well, what did I actually feel at that particular moment? So we might say that every decision that is made and put into the frame of reference called the personality or the not-I's, and they're all decisions, aren't they? Every one is a decision of some kind, becomes a distortion of perception. If I decide that the only thing that matters is never having second force, which we call the purpose of living. It says that I'm to be non-disturbed at all times. And if we looked at this little thing throughout the last few weeks, we would see that the only thing that ever disturbs me is second force. Is that right? So by saying I want to be not disturbed, what I'm saying is I want all second force to end. Now, does that create a little bit of a distortion in the perception? And does every little bit of second force that comes along change from just being a natural event, a natural occurrence, into something else? It now becomes someone attacking me. It becomes bad luck. It becomes forces of evil out to get me. It's something to be blamed. I don't even know what the event is anymore. It's been distorted by that decision. And then another little decision comes along and says, I know what to do about this. And perhaps the first decision comes up and says, complain about it. Well, now it's become a terrible thing that must be gotten rid of using a magical act called complaining. So if someone were to ask you what's actually going on, they won't get an answer. They'll get all these distortions that come from the decisions that have been made. So not only are their senses unreliable because they only tell us about a very small part of existence called the physical universe, they tell us nothing about our native world where spirit lives. And they get us after a while to believe that what we sense is all that there is. So we never make discoveries about anything except the physical universe. Everything else is just beliefs. It's not discoveries that we've made, it's beliefs that we've picked up along the way. And those begin to distort perception. Every belief that we've accepted from an authority interprets this experience in the light of that belief, doesn't it? So if I've picked up in the belief that eating certain things is bad for you, then any time that's offered to eat, I'm in a dreadful state, aren't I? When all that happened is somebody just put some food in front of me. But I've interpreted it as something attacking me. If I accept what's said from authorities that breathing other people's smoke will kill me, then any time someone lights a cigarette, it's now an attack on me personally, isn't it? That's called distorted perception, isn't it? You don't know whether that's true or not. There is nothing in your personal experience that says that that's true. I know you can tell stories that justify it, but what do you know? You distort perception. I don't know whether your stories are true or not. That is your reality. Whatever the frame of reference interprets is going on, that is your reality. You don't know what really happened. You only know about this distorted perception that comes from the frame of reference. You're not paying enough attention to even know what the physical facts were. You'll tell the physical facts in terms of this distortion. And this is really obvious when you're around somebody who's called insane, isn't it? Because they'll tell you the most outlandish stories about what's going on right now that you can't see. They'll tell you all about things that are happening supposedly right in front of your eyes, isn't that right? And you look around and they aren't there. But they're absolutely real to them, aren't they? Unless you just want to believe they're the most insincere gooks around and they're just lying to you. It's obviously very real to them. That is what they perceive. Except that that's just a dramatic case of what happens to everyone all the time. That's the way we all live. We live in a scary, threatening world because the personality was formed while we were helpless. So it distorts perception and says, it's scary out there. There are many things to fear. How many times have you had something to fear last week?
Nothing real. A lot. But not much.
What would you know about real?
I wouldn't.
I see. You're just going to tell us you know. See, I say that, Mike, just because you say that as if you know something, and you don't. I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm just trying to point out how you're trying to get us all to believe that you know something you don't know. I'm not buying it. Maybe everyone else will, but I'm not going to buy it. You don't know that. It's just something that you like to repeat. But I bet you anything the next time something scary comes along, you're going to buy it hook, line, and sinker. And then a week later, when somebody says a question like that again, you'll say, well, nothing real. But you don't know that. If you knew it wasn't real, you would not respond to it as if it were, would you? So what good does it do to say that? That is not a discovery that you have made, which is what we're kind of talking about here tonight. It is a belief that you have set up, and it does not keep you from going through that experience again. Actually discovering that it's not real would say the next time I won't buy it. Setting it up as a belief in the frame of reference means nothing, because the frame of reference is full of contradictions already. What good will one more contradiction do? It won't stop any other contradiction from happening. The whole frame of reference is set up in such a way that it is always compartmentalized. The I identifies completely with whatever is happening now. It doesn't even remember what happened 2 seconds ago. You don't believe me? How many times have you had somebody tell you 2 exactly contradictory statements in a row, and you point it out to them and they say, I never said the first one. It is set up so that you will be identified with only one thing at a time, and you will never see that it contradicts itself. So one time this belief may actually work. This may be the part of the frame of reference that pops up for a moment. And so for one little moment, you don't buy a fear. And you, of course, will say, oh, I've improved. I'm much better now. Except the next 50 times, this one won't come up, and you will buy it. That's the whole point. That was one of the things that we talked about when we said how this personality is developed. That it is Every decision has an antithetical, contradictory decision, isn't it? Right? We don't see it. We believe completely that telling other people what's wrong will get me my way. And we believe just as completely that doing as I'm told, no matter what I want, will get me my way. Now those are in exact contradiction to each other, aren't they? This one says, the only way that I will be non-disturbed is if I do anything that I want, and if anybody gets in my way, I'm going to decidedly point it out to them because then they'll move. And this one says you must do as you're told, not as you would wish, in order to have no resistance. And we happily go through life doing both of those. Isn't that right? This one says that you have rights, and you must stick up for those rights. And this one says you have no rights, because you have to take care of everyone else before you can get what you want. And that doesn't seem to bother us one whit, that we're living by entirely contradictory beliefs about, or decisions about how to get what we want. Because at the moment of distortion, whatever distorted it is completely real, isn't it? We do not see what actually happened. We only see the distortion that's given to us by one of these decisions. We have another set of beliefs that says everyone else is to blame for my problems. And then we have another set of beliefs that says I am the only thing that is to blame for my problems. What good is one more contradiction going to do in this mess of contradictions, you see? That is another discovery that I can make. If I would actually look at what's going on and do this incredible thing called self-knowing or self-awareness, then I would make for myself the discovery that somehow or another the frame of reference is capable of holding contradictions, exact opposite decisions, and functioning as though it were one thing all the time that was always the same, which it obviously isn't. Then I could go on and make the discovery, not as an idea anymore, but the discovery that there are actually many, many, many people running me. That I am not the ruler of me, I'm the slave of me. I'm not even a servant. I'm the slave. I do whatever they tell me. As our own discovery from having seen it. There is nothing in the sensory world that will ever let a person discover that, is there? Because when somebody does that weird thing and says, oh, I never said that, we just find some way to explain it. They know perfectly well they said that. They're just being silly. They're being obstinate. We don't just say, well, maybe they believe that. Because we have never made the discovery for ourselves that we do that same thing. Because we do it ourselves. How could we ever notice? One comes up, I do that. The opposite comes up, I do that. And I never notice. That must be discovered by seeing self in relationship with events and noticing over time these contradictions that happily exist within this frame of reference. It distorts everything that we see. One of the biggest distortions is that I am one and the same person all of the time. Until a person discovers for themselves that they are not, they are actually three things. They are the way of survival, and the way of justice, and the poor little chooser who has to sit in between and try to figure out how to please the rock and the hard place. We're not one thing. We're three. That is a discovery that one must make by looking to see. No one ever makes that without doing some kind of self-awareness, self-knowing. There's nothing in the sensory world that will let that happen. Occasionally, it becomes a little noticeable, and very quickly we have a way of hiding it from ourselves, as we do all contradictions of self. There's a mechanism set up in there that we know nothing about that hides every contradiction, that sets up a little barrier between all these compartments in self, so that we never see that these three are not actually three. They're billions. But first we have to make the discovery that we're three. Then perhaps we can discover by seeing that these three, the two of them, were made up of billions of people who all pretend to be three people. Discovered, or it can be put into the frame of reference as a belief, in which case it will do nothing but further distort perception. The work that we must do is to see the distortion of perception and get rid of it. That is the first job of any human being. To see that the awareness is getting a distorted perception, which it is reporting to X as the true circumstances, so X responds to those, the distorted perception, not the real one. So therefore the distorted one is real, isn't it? Except the response is inadequate, because it's not to a true situation. So I'm disturbed, and on the game goes. Because every response that I ever take is to a distorted perception of reality. It's always inadequate.
If you're disturbed and what? I didn't hear something.
And now you're doing the same thing again. Instead of seeing that it was a perfectly adequate response to a world that doesn't exist.
You're disturbed with the response.
With the inadequate response, and I figure there must be something wrong with me, and now I've got to go find out what's wrong and fix it. And so now I'm living in a distorted world again. And there's nothing to break that except for this inner work of self-knowing that can lead one to discover things that cannot be sensed. Okay? Such as, I'm incomplete as I am. This is something we've been talking about a lot. There is no way that you can sensorily determine that you are incomplete. But when you start seeing the way this is working, it is very clear that something is going on outside of what I know. That there's some other part of me that I'm not aware of that is responding to all of this crud that's going through the awareness, all of this perception, in ways that I cannot figure out. And then I can discover for myself that I am not a thing, that there is nothing for me to identify with, that I am a spirit in communion with another spirit. Except I can't sense that other spirit. I can only discover it in these relationships by saying, you know, there's something going on here that just doesn't make sense with the way I see things. There's more to this than I know. And then this becomes a discovery. Not a belief. Not something I was told. It becomes completely real to me, even though it cannot be sensed. It becomes just as real to me as the body that I'm wearing, where all the sensory stuff comes from. I have no way of thinking except in those terms, because that is my reality now. It's a discovery that I made. You can't even begin to think about anything without considering, well, what's X's role in this? When you make that discovery, you don't have to think about it anymore. It's just there. Just as much as the body you're wearing is. That's the purpose for having the outside person who does all of this. I mean, we just saw a really wonderful example of this very thing that we're talking about. Someone from outside says, oh, by the way, did you know that the way that you're living will destroy you forever? And we manage to distort perception so that we don't have to even pay attention to that. Because that's just too upsetting. What do you mean the way I'm living will destroy me forever? I've been told I have an immortal soul. How dare you tell me I will be destroyed or annihilated forever? Besides, I know I'm going to be here for at least another 50 years, so what do I have to worry about it now? If it destroys me, it'll be tomorrow, so I'll worry about it in a week or two. That's a distortion of perception, isn't it? You don't know that you have a soul. But that particular distortion that comes from an old decision, if you like that idea, allows you to act in a certain way, as if a certain thing were true, when you actually have no idea if it's true or not. If you're really honest with yourself, you don't know whether you have a soul or not, do you? Does anyone here know for certain that they have a soul? And yet you can act on that distortion of perception as if it were real. Does anyone here know that they're going to live for another 10 years? But I can act on that as if it were true, can I? So we had a very lovely, as we could do with anything, because just about everything human beings do demonstrates this, a really lovely demonstration of the way that a distorted perception gets us to act on things that are simply not in evidence. Our first job is to use these ideas that have been given from outside to say this is a description because you'll never find it on your own. The perception is so distorted that you would simply never come up with this on your own. You could never see it. You're living in a dream, and that's the facts. The world that you live in does not exist. It's a dream. That's really what distorted perception means, doesn't it? It means you're living in your own hallucinations. And you have no idea what's really going on. And it is a well-known fact that there is something that will wake a person up out of these dreams. And what it is the shock of reality intruding into the dream. It's the only thing that will wake a person up out of it that anyone has ever found. Is for reality to suddenly intrude and produce this little shock, this little jolt. Just as if somebody went when you were deep asleep in the midst of a dream and shook you really hard. And you get a little shock of awakening, don't you? That's what provides the energy to do self-knowing, is those little shocks. As you see things in a whole new way that have always been distorted before. But they're unpleasant. They're second force to my desire to have everything I ever wanted my way all of the time, no matter what. And so I resent the little shock, and I resist it. And I find it tremendously difficult to do this incredible work of inner awareness. Yes, ma'am?
I don't perceive it to be unpleasant. I mean, when I catch on to something, it's supposed to be unpleasant.
Hell no! I never found it unpleasant.
Oh, but you're just saying it's unpleasant, like it's unpleasant
I'm
for everybody.
describing
So I'm
what
just
seems
checking.
to be happening with most people. It was never unpleasant to me. You know why? My dream was a nightmare. Waking up out of it was always great.
Well, that's how it is, I think.
For some, but I'll tell you, I think there are lots of people here who will tell you that that is not true for them.
Okay, I just wanted to check.
There were times when I found it unpleasant, but most of the time I was overjoyed. It's like, you mean I don't have to believe that stupid thing anymore? But most people don't feel that way about it. And you can see that by the amount of work that's done around here. These things have to be discovered for self. And each of those discoveries has a little shock as you realize that the distortion that you've been seeing things through is simply not true. And that little shock is what gives us the ability to go on doing this. It provides the energy for it. Are there any questions or comments about this so far? This is why everyone says you need someone from outside. You could not come to this on your own. It's a very extraordinary thing. In the history of this planet, there are very few people who have ever done this on their own. You need someone outside who has already done it, constantly pointing out that you're not. You're dreaming you're doing it. Because unfortunately that's what happens, isn't it? We dream that we do the work. Much of the time. If I want to go on living in this dream, that's fine. If I don't, I need to actually spend the time trying to prove this wrong. Prove there's something else in self. Prove your theories about yourself are correct. How will you ever get rid of a distorted perception if you don't try to prove something wrong? All you can do is add a new distortion. There will be no inner discoveries. There will be no inner shocks of awakening. Because you set out to prove it right. And that's what you've done with everything. It's just added it to the frame of reference as a new distortion. So now you live in the dream that you're a wonderful person who's doing the work. You just got to stay away from those people who've actually done the work. Because they probably will notice you're just dreaming, since they actually know what doing the work is. You take each and everything that is said and say, I'm going to prove this wrong. I'm going to look at self and find something that is not one of those 8 things. It is not one of these 6 decisions. It is not the master decision. It is not the 7th decision. I'm going to find something that isn't that. Now that would be practicing self-awareness. You'd have to be very aware to find something, wouldn't you, other than these things? It would take tremendous effort. You might come across some very interesting discoveries along the way. Okay, let's take a short break. One more thing I'd like to talk about when we get out of here. Okay, any questions or comments before I move on? You get this idea? You live in the dream and the dream is completely real. I know about your question. See if I You get this? I want to talk a bit about another discovery that could be made. I really mean what I'm saying, that this is a discovery. It's something that can only be seen by an awareness that is looking at relationships between itself and the personality or the frame of reference that it sees by, and the things that the frame of reference is trying to deal with, money, relationships, cars, jobs, all that stuff that we're always dealing with. And in the midst of that, occasionally we can make certain little discoveries. Okay. And one of those is that a human being does not have one mind, as they believe that they do. That each of us actually has three that we know of. There may be more. But the first of those is the one that we come here with already developed, that we can call the stimulus response mind. And it works entirely off of sensation. This sensation is good, therefore I will do this. This sensation is bad, therefore I will do that. Each of us has that mind. It's the one we came here with. It is nonverbal, therefore somewhat difficult to experience because we're not too good at dealing with nonverbal stuff anymore. As soon as we developed language, we sort of lost the ability to remember most of what happens inside that mind because we can't symbolize it very well. Isn't that right? But when we first got here for the first couple of years or so, not quite that long, about the first couple of years, this mind is about the only one that's functioning. So most people have very dim recollections of the first 2 years they're here. Isn't that about right, if any at all? Because it's all nonverbal. So when it's stored in the frame of reference, it doesn't have words attached to it. So we've had to take all the decisions that were made by the stimulus response mind, called the master decision, and the first decision, and partly the second decision. And we've had to put words on them. Most people can't even get at the master decision. The best they can do is say they want to be happy in words. But actually coming to the understanding that what happy means is that I will always have sensations that I think are good, and I will never have sensations that I think are bad, is very difficult for most of us because that was an entirely non-verbal decision made by the stimuli response mind that said, this decision, or this sensation says that I'm being hurt, that I'm getting out of balance with my environment, and I must respond to it now, because that's all it understands. And then, as we develop a little bit further, we come up with what might be called the magical mind. Perhaps another word for it might be child mind. But a descriptive word for it is magical mind. And that mind, as it begins to develop, helps make the second decision, but primarily makes the third and fourth decisions. The third and fourth decisions are that if I just do the right thing, then some magical thing will happen. It'll all just work out. Isn't that right? So all children go through a stage where they believe in magic. But there are certain potions that you can take that will have mysterious effects. Of course, now we call that medicine. And that there are incantations that you can make that will have mysterious effects. Of course, now we call that hypnosis, affirmations, belief. Oh, if I just believe strongly enough, it would be so. if I could just hold this thought in the mind, then mysterious, magical things would happen. Isn't that right? It's just that I can't hold it there long enough. I keep thinking these other thoughts. See, it's still very much in evidence, isn't it? That mind has not gone anywhere. It's still very much in evidence. And it makes the second decision along with the stimuli response mind, which sees it in terms of having a right to certain sensations. And the magical mind comes along and says, yes, and if you stick up for those rights, wonderful things will happen. And then, in a later time, what we might call the grown-up or logical mind begins to develop, but it never really kicks into gear. This is the part of us that is deep asleep. We tried to use it. We didn't know how. I will never forget this. But do you know that I was something like 34 years old when I realized that the reason I could never understand logic was because nobody else was ever logical? I thought all of my life until I was about 34 years old that I was the only person on planet Earth who didn't know what logic was. Which I thought was really strange, since by then I was programming computers. I could not figure that one out. Because what everyone else told me about logic was so absurd that I couldn't figure it out. Except it just so happens I'm one of the most logical people that has ever existed, as far as I can tell, on the face of planet Earth. And anyone who knows me at all personally knows that I'm just almost always logical. So I assumed that what everybody else told me was logic was actually logic, and it made absolutely no sense to me. Because this mind functions pretty well in Philip. And in most people, it is fast asleep. And what they call logic is not logic at all. Because that mind is never developed. It is dreaming. And the dream seems very logical, except it's based on completely false premises that come from old decisions. And those old decisions distort perception and determine my attitude towards all things. And the attitude determines action, because that's what reports to X. Except in most people, this mind is fast asleep. It never really got activated. We attempted to use it, and all we managed to do was make the 56 decisions with it. Which, if you notice, are of a very different order than the first four. If you look at the way they function, the 56 decisions, you notice that they work real different than the first four. They're much more verbal. They have much stronger pictures attached to them. Isn't that right? They have very strong imagery attached to them. Because they were made by the grown-up mind that was just beginning to function. And it never really kept going. It went back to sleep. And so these minds pretty much run our lives. The stimulus response mind and the magical mind. It is our job to start using the adult mind or the grown-up mind. For something other than dreaming. Which is what these two decisions do. This is the big dreamer, isn't it? 5 is always dreaming about something. Oh, it will be so wonderful when. I just figured this all out. And I do this, and I do that, and then I'll be like this, and then it'll all be like that, and it is constantly in this dream of how it will be when. Because that all seems very logical, doesn't it? If I were like this, then it would be okay. And it's dreaming about what's stopping it. If this weren't there, then everything would be okay. If they would just stop doing this, then it would be just wonderful, wouldn't it? That's its idea of logic. Is these dreams about who's to blame for why second force will not get out of my life. Now we could begin to use this mind to assist us in understanding what we're seeing through self-awareness. So the first frame of reference that each of us have is a conditioned frame of reference, based primarily on the way that the stimulus response in the magical mind or child mind works, with a little bit of this thrown in just for the heck of it. Then each of us at some point or another develops a bit of a technical frame of reference. That is one thing that we do, sort of wake the logical mind up to some degree or another, so that we learn how to drive the car, how to do our job, what is the best way to deal with certain situations on the job, the one that creates the fewest problems as its aftermath. In other words, it manages to be somewhat rational under very specific conditions, called those things that we have decided to see as a technical subject. Now, many people don't see many things as a technical subject, do they? Many people never manage to see their jobs as a technical subject. It's another thing for the conditioned mind to work in that says, I'm here not to get paid, but to get constant pleasure and avoid all pain. It's my right to get paid. I don't have to do anything. I just have to show up. Isn't that right? That's the way many people look at their jobs. I don't have to actually do anything for the money. It's my right just to get paid. And as long as I'm here, I might as well get all the pleasure out of it I can and avoid all the pain. And some people manage to see that their job is technical, and that they're being paid not just to show up, but to actually maybe do a little something, while they're there. And start to look at their job in a more logical manner. This works, that doesn't. Sometimes things that are unpleasant to me work better than things that are pleasant to me, and I will do that. That's called seeing technically, where it's no longer entirely about non-disturbance. Sometimes I can see that it's to my advantage to be disturbed a little bit, because it means I will be much less disturbed later. Isn't that right? So I can accept a certain amount of disturbance now, because I see it's to my advantage from this mind, which can be logical, because it will make it a lot less disturbing later. Whereas if I choose the non-disturbing method now, it will make it tremendously unpleasant later. This mind is pretty much dormant in most of us most of the time, except in those parts of our living that we treat as a technical subject. And so many of us work our butts off because it's the only part of our lives where we actually feel somewhat comfortable. So we work all the time because we've managed to look at work in a fairly technical way. And we're much less disturbed when we're working than we are any other time. So we work as much as we possibly can. It never seems to occur to us that we could extend that technical frame of reference to include everything, which would be to wake the logical mind up. That all the things that are covered by the conditioned frame of reference could be seen as a technical subject, as something to be experimented with, tried out, not accepted, because that's what a technical subject is. You get a certain amount of training and you realize that probably it won't matter until you do it yourself. And that a lot of times the things that you're trained in are simply wrong. Or they were misunderstood. So in a technical subject, you realize you must have experience to make sense out of the information that you have. You can't just grab a shitload of information and expect to be able to do something with it. You got to get the experience that comes from experimenting and trying things out for yourself, and maybe finding things that nobody bothered to tell you because it would have taken too long, little shortcuts and things. Because usually when you're trained to do it a way that helps you to understand, and then as you go along, you realize that there are shorter ways to do it. You go back to the person who trained you, and they say, yeah, I know. What's your point? Remember that happened? Well, of course I know that, but if I had told you that in the beginning, you would have never figured out how it worked. So I told you the long way so you'd see how it worked. Obviously you understand it. You made your own discoveries. So, yeah.
It's not exactly a question, but
Okay.
the reason we're quasi-awake at work is because, in my case, like, I know I don't know how to be a manager. And so I go, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here, so I will look, pay attention. That's the difference, is that when I'm trying to be a manager, I paid some
I know,
attention
that was the next point.
and thought about some things.
That's exactly it.
But I don't sit here and go, I don't know how to be a human being or how to be a wife, and so I don't bother
That's
trying to learn how to do
exactly
it.
The difference is that this mind says, I don't know. And so it finds out. The conditioned mind never says, I don't know, does it? It is full of contradictions. Each of them is known to be true because they're based on decisions about the way things are. The technical mind always says, I know some things, but I don't know this moment. I've got to find out. That's what a technical frame of reference is. No matter how much accumulated information I have in the frame of reference, I still have to find out what's going on now to know what to do, what to apply. And perhaps I don't know at all. So I will only know what to do if I pay attention. The conditioned mind says you don't need to do that. It knows everything, all the time. So it's fast asleep. Now you understand what I mean when I say that a person makes discoveries. Nobody has to tell anybody that's what being asleep means, if they actually look. I remember one time when I was in 5th grade, I will never forget this. Teacher taught us how to do long division. I'm pretty good at math. I looked at it and thought it was a stupid waste of time and raised my hand and did what they suggested that you do it in the way that is now called short division. She expelled me for being a smart ass because I'd obviously read ahead in the book. I'm really serious. That's what happened. I was just a thorn in her side. People don't make discoveries, they do what they're told. Okay, so she beat me to the punch. I don't care, I'm glad she made the discovery. I don't care if she says it or I say it. But this person was so conditioned that they assumed that the person was doing it to get attention and approval. Whereas in reality it was just like, hey, just like that. Raise your hand and say, yeah, but. So, that's a technical frame of reference. It says, yeah, well, the person may have seen this on their own. Great. This is what you have to do. Whether somebody ever tells you this or not, you've still got to discover it for yourself. Being told about it we'll just get it into the conditioned frame of reference that acts on it as a distortion of perception. Discovering it for yourself says, this is the way it is. It's not distorted anymore. It's not based on a decision. It's based on seeing it as you experience things. But that is exactly right. The difference between the logical mind or the grown-up mind being awake in the sleep is when it says, I don't know. Let's find out. Let me try some things and see how they work. And after I've tried a few things, I'll pick some and say, well, these seem to work out better. But even then, I still don't know if that'll always be the case. There may have been certain circumstances that made them work out better this time. And maybe the next time I try them, they won't work out so good. So I still have to constantly say, I don't know. Which leads us to the next little thing, called vanity. Because the one thing that vanity will never do is what? Say, I don't know. Vanity knows everything, isn't that right? So the fact is that each of us has already made, even though we suggested that one make a seventh decision, we have already actually made a seventh decision in our lives. And that decision is based on greed. It says the only thing that matters is the sensation that I'm experiencing now. There's nothing else that matters. The only thing that exists in my world is what I'm sensing now. It must always be good. It's based on our old friend, the master decision, isn't that right? Everything that we do is a violent attempt to get more, better, and different, which is the technical definition of greed. The constant, ongoing desire for more, better, and different. Now, what does that say? That says that I serve a master who will never be satisfied. How would you like to have a job with a boss that no matter what you did, it was never good enough? It's fun, isn't it? You had that experience. It was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
Tribulation.
Huh?
Yeah, it wasn't.
It's terrible, isn't it? And that's what we all do. We are the slave to the senses, and the senses are never satisfied, except for a very short moment.
And then you fall asleep.
And even if you get them satisfied, then what do they say? More. Better. Or it wasn't given to me for the right reason. So it doesn't count. You didn't actually feel good because you did it for the wrong reason. You know, that happen in relationships. Tell somebody you love them and they say, why? Don't ever answer that question. I promise you, whatever reason you love them for will not be the right one, and you're going to have about 3 weeks of somebody ticked as heck at you, okay? It's not enough that you love them. You have to love them for their reasons. Isn't that right? You ever played that game with somebody? I just want to answer the question. I tell it. Or if I really care about it, I'll try and find out ahead of time what the right answer is. What do you want to be loved for? What do you ask? You see? It's called greed, isn't it? It's not enough to be love. It has to be love for the right reasons. It's got to be different. It's got to be more. It's got to be better. And that brings about every violence done to man, the attempt to serve greed. Which happens because we make this decision that every sensation that I ever have must be good to me. It must feel good. And out of that, we develop these two little things, mainly from the logical mind, called vanity and pride. And that is actually the seventh decision. This is vanity, and this is pride. It's the way that the logical mind functions right now. It dreams that it is the most wonderful thing that ever was. We see that in all the number 5 decisions. I deserve constant pleasure. After all, I worked so hard at bettering myself. I know all my faults. I can list them off to you if you ask me. I know every single one of them. I know all my virtues. And of course, one of my greatest virtues is that I know my faults and I'm working to make them gone. So I dream me, based mainly on the decisions that come from 5. A few of these others get in there. After all, I'm very noble and I'm always trying to please everyone else. I never think of myself. And I always do the right thing. Or at least I'm always trying. Sometimes I mess up, but I always see it and I always take care of it. In other words, I know everything. I know me, I know you, I know what's good, I know what's bad, I know what's right, I know what's wrong, I know what ought to be, I know what shouldn't be, I know how to get what I want, I know what I want, I know what I need, I know what happiness is, I know what I need to be happy, I know how to get what I need to be happy, I know everything. Except for who to blame for the fact that even though I know, I'm not doing it. That's the only thing I don't know. Isn't that right? I don't know what to blame for the fact that even though I know all these things and I'm working so hard at getting better and getting more and getting different, that I'm still not happy. And that's the seventh decision, isn't it? Greed and vanity and pride. That's the decision that rules our lives at this point in time, that the logical mind is working off of. Of all these decisions, it is the only one that can be changed because the logical mind is the only one that never develops. So that we can get that logical mind to make a new decision, because it's not fully developed yet. It has a lot of growing to do. It started to develop. These others are finished. The stimulus response mind, it works just fine. Somebody pokes you, you poke them back. Magical mind is just fine. It served you during childhood when you couldn't see decent relationships between things. But the logical mind has never really developed much. So with that mind, we can make a new decision that says, I'm tired of dreaming my life away. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to wake up. I want to live without these distortions of perception. And I'm willing to do the work that it takes. I'm willing to pay the price for real perception. which is everything that I believe. Everything is a price, right? The price for an undistorted perception is to pay with everything that you believe. Everything that's distorting perception. You take it to X, you show it to X, you say, here it is, in a terribly logical way, without condemning or justifying. You just say, here it is, this is what's distorting perception, and you let X take care of it. And then that particular mind that never really developed in this begins to start functioning. And then we can grow a frame of reference that replaces eventually the conditioned frame of reference that is technical about everything. There is nothing that it is not technical about. And one day we might even discover that there is a fourth mind that we know absolutely nothing about. And we might even develop that too. I hate to be trapped in the logical mind for the rest of the life. It's useful. But there is another mind that most people know absolutely nothing about. Because it will not develop until you've developed everything in the physical form. Because that mind exists in the spiritual body, which is the technical frame of reference. It doesn't exist in the physical body. So when I live entirely in the technical frame of reference instead of this conditioned frame of reference, that no longer has decisions based on knowledge, what I already know, but has experience based on saying, I don't know to everything. We grow a new body for the awareness that perceives without distortion. And that has the ability to develop an entirely new kind of mind that is really unknown to us. We have no idea what it does. Without it. 15 minutes on. Okay. Are there any questions or comments? It's all clear as mud.
The question that I was starting to ask you, when you were saying we should look at the picture itself and try to prove it false.
Right.
And the idea being that everything I do is one of these 6 decisions. And I just, the question I had was...
Well, I didn't say that. I said one of those 8 decisions.
Right, okay. I turned it into 6. It seemed to me that on occasion, I simply look rationally at something and I'll tell you what happened. I had to fire somebody, and I put it off for a month thinking, just in case, I mean, this person was damned annoying to me. It would have been a lot
In case it was a personal thing
easier
and
for
not,
me.
yeah. In case it was a personal thing and not a rational thing.
In case. I mean, the personal thing was definitely going on in addition to incompetence. But it seems to me that the decision to put it off a month and make sure that it wasn't just the not eyes making the decision for me was not any of those things, that was a real, it seems to me on occasion something happens.
It was part of this, which comes from the 7th decision.
The 7th decision has been like 3 different things, so I don't know what it is right now.
No, this is exactly the same as I originally said. This is the decision that I am important.
Oh, okay.
Which turns into greed, vanity, and pride. Okay? The way it functions. But it also allows me to treat some things as technical. Because the truth is, I couldn't survive with just a conditioned mind. The conditioned mind sees me entirely as a helpless infant. So I need some other thing going on besides just the conditioned mind. So each of us makes enough of a decision that I'm important, that I can develop some parts of my life that I can see technically and say, I need to experiment with this, not just know it. I have to find out for myself.
So it's the decision that I'm important?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't lead me, that led directly to reconsidering this? Or
I
that
don't
led
know
to?
that. I don't know that.
I'm just...
See, unfortunately, even though we remake the seventh decision, the old one sticks around anytime I'm not awake. When the logical mind goes to sleep and it's operating on the old seventh decision, when it wakes up, it replaces the old. In other words, I no longer feel important when the logical mind is functioning.
Right.
When I've made a new seventh decision, I feel whatever I've made a new decision about, like I want to be awake or whatever. Okay? But what you just described is the function of one of those two seventh decisions. I'll leave it to you to figure out which one.
Well, okay. I guess if you throw in the desire to be awake, then yeah, I mean, everything is the old mind or your attempt.
That's part of the picture, yeah.
Okay.
And that's exactly what we want to do is develop this technical frame of reference and stop developing the conditioned frame of reference. Start treating everything as a technical subject that we say, I don't know about, so we can make our own discoveries. Even though information has been given, but that's what happens with any technical subject. You're trained. If you leave it at training, then you've been conditioned. It's not technical to you. You're a stimuli response, you're a trained seal. You don't understand what you're doing. I mean, I know this very well because I've done so much training with computer programs. Most people don't want to understand what they're doing. They just want to be told what button to push in. If you try to actually explain to them what's going on, you've had this experience, they get upset with you. Don't tell me. All right, fine. Be a fucking dog. See if I can. That's all they are, is trained dogs. I've had this happen. People do not want to understand what they're doing. They want to be conditioned. It took me a long time to figure that out. Because it's just so weird to me. So when all you have is training, which is what we're basically doing now, is offering training, it's just more conditioning. If you look at that training as you would whatever you've done in your life that was about technical subject, that says, okay, fine, somebody told me these things, now I'm going to go find out for myself by experimenting and trying them out and playing with them. I'd like to say even take it further and go so far as to say by proving it wrong. Because if you make a mistake on your job, the worst that happens is you have to get another one. This is not your job we're talking about. This is your life. You can afford, with training on the job, to experiment with it and not go all the way to the science part. This isn't going to prove it wrong. I don't know if you can afford to do that when what we're talking about is something that distorts perception so that you're living a dream. So that I can never respond to the actual situation that's there. So this is kind of a little different, whether or not you have this job or not. You always get another job. You'll have to convince me that reincarnation exists before you will get me to say you can only get another life. Every piece of evidence anyone's ever given me for reincarnation can explain another way. That doesn't make my explanation right, but it certainly says that their explanation may not be right, doesn't it? If I can come up with an equally rational explanation when you don't know either, for sure, then I don't know which of this is right, so I'm going to kind of, like do it the way that I like to do it, which is, if you have two choices, pick the one that will accomplish the most. It has the most probability of accomplishing a lot in case you're wrong. See, what harm could there be if I believe that I won't come back? And I work really hard to do it now. But there could be a lot of harm if I believe I can come back and I'm wrong. So I assume there is no such thing. Because nobody's ever been able to give me a story that explains it to my satisfaction. I can always come up with another pretty story that says something else. I don't know which story is right. I don't care. I'm going to assume this is the only chance I've got. Okay. So I'm going to work real hard to find every decision that has been made that distorts perception, that has become the condition of my life, which is what conditioning means. Okay? If I believe in that distorted perception, then that is my world. X responds to it as if it's my world, and it is the condition in which I live. It determines all action and determines the condition of my life. Later on we may talk a little bit more about that. But that is what conditioning means. I'd like to treat everything as a technical subject that says, I don't know, and anything I've been told I'm going to work to prove wrong. And then perhaps I will not have decisions that distort perception. And I'll just be able to see what is. And make a lot of discoveries about things that cannot be sensed. Any questions or comments? Do you want to take a break before we give the experiment for this week, or I'll go home?
I'd like to continue. Take a break.
If you'd like to what?
Yeah, I'd like to continue.
One of the things that I think would be of great value to look at is greed, vanity, and pride, don't you? If we accept that technical frame of reference begins with I don't know, and yet what it's actually doing right now, the frame of reference is always saying I know, and it might be interesting to see this distorted image that's going on of everything that I know. So one of the things that would be of value would be to get a little sheet that talks about all the greed that is going on. Is this life constantly saying that the senses must be good? That I deserve that? That's the way it should be. It's called greed. See, life gives you everything. It's just that unfortunately you didn't want everything. You only wanted certain things. But life is real impartial. It just gives you everything. And we develop greed for only good things. We decide, we know out of all the things that life gives us, what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong. Because we never ask the question, what is to my advantage? Which is what might replace greed if we could ever see our way to that. So it would be of some value to see this constant struggle to only have those things that I want. So much so that most of our lives are 80 or 90% okay. But The only thing we can think about is the 10 or 20% that isn't so hot right now. If you ask us what's okay with our lives, probably can't think about it. But boy, if you ask us what's wrong, get ready for a list. Everybody knows about the 10 or 20% that is not to my taste. I never managed to get it closer than 98%. I've never had 100%, but that's what greed tells me I should have, isn't that right? 100%. It should all be my way. All the time. That was the very first decision I made when I got here. And to start looking at the picture of self called vanity, which is a false picture of self. It's all an illusion. Because it's pretty static, and I'm not. I change every little moment. This picture of self doesn't change much. A little bit over time. But not near as much as I do. And it is all designed to paint a picture of self as being deserving of greed. Isn't that right? And that's the purpose of vanity, is to explain why I am owed and have the right to all the things that I say would be good for me. After all, I'm nice and I'm kind and I'm giving and I'm warm and I'm lovely and I have my flaws, but I'm working on them. I deserve this. In fact, I've turned it into a need. Isn't that right? This is not even something I deserve anymore. I need this. Except it's not true. That's an illusion. It comes from that lovely, distorted perception. Most of us have never experienced a need. Do you know that? And if we did, it was for a very brief period of time, because need says you will die without it. That's what need says. Without it, you die. Isn't that right? And most of us have never experienced a true need. Or if we did, it was only for a very short time. What have you actually been without to the point of near death?
Oxygen.
But it was for a very brief period of time.
Yeah, it was. I'm still here.
I did say, except for a very brief period of time. How many times in the life have you been without something that you needed? We can count them, can't we? They're so infrequent. How many times have you claimed to needed something? It's a lie, isn't it? It's called distorted perception. When we claim that we need something that we don't have, we have what we call around here made it important. That's what greed does. Anytime I make something important, I go into fear or anxiety that I will not get it and I will die. I have now reported a tremendous lie to X that I'm about to die. And it's not true. Because I've elevated the sensations of this body to things I will die without. I have a mind that must shut up or I will die. I have feelings that must shape up or I will die. If I think that thought one more time, I'll just die. I have this sexual urge that must be gratified or I'll die. All these hungers that we have, these appetites that must be gratified or we'll just die. And the truth is, all the really essential hungers that we do actually have, they're being taken care of, aren't they? And have for most of our lives, well over 99% of it. We don't live in a very dangerous world anymore. There's very few people that ever need anything for more than a very few minutes. But out of greed, we claim that every little fantasy that goes through the mind is a need that I will die without. And then vanity jumps up and paints a lovely picture of self as being deserving to justify having that need. And should ever anyone point out that I'm not near as deserving as I think I am, then pride will come along and attack them and defend that picture of it. It's okay for me to point out my flaws, because that means I'm working on them. You see, that's part of the vanity. You do it, and you better be ready to defend yourself, because I'm always right and in the right according to vanity. And God help everyone when I'm not, because I will attack to the hilt if pride gets invoked and vanity gets invoked. Isn't that right? Even when I'm wrong. I will attack everyone around me rather than admit that I don't know or that I'm wrong. That's called vanity. And pride is the attacking to defend that false picture of self. So the other thing that we can do is start to write down what this false picture is. And one of the easiest ways to do it is to notice every time I feel defensive. Every time pride comes up and says you've got to defend yourself, your false picture has been attacked, and you can say, what am I defending? That's vanity. If it were true, I wouldn't need to defend it. I've been saying this for years. I know people don't really quite get it when I say this, but I'm going to say it one more time. If you tell me the truth, how can it hurt me? You haven't attacked me. You've given me a very valuable insight into something that I could use. If you lie, what do I care? Isn't that about right? If we just look at it rationally and without vanity, that's the way it is, isn't it? If you tell me a lie about me, what do I care? Does that hurt me that you lied about me? Or am I so concerned about my reputation and the image that I have that I don't care about the truth? And if you tell me the truth, whether it's pleasant or not, then it's just the truth. What's the problem? Except most of us feel attacked when we're told the truth, don't we? Unless it's pretty. What's been attacked? Other than this false picture of self. And so pride jumps up to defend and say, yes, but I know that's true, but I'm working on it. Or I just tried that the other day. We hear that one around here all the time, don't we? Somebody comes up with something and they talk to Phil about it. And Phil says such and such, and they say, oh, I tried that 2 weeks ago. Well, that certainly makes it understandable. Now you can prove that you know. Except you don't. You tried it once 2 weeks ago. That's not a way of life. If it were a way of living, which is called, it was an inner discovery that I lived by now, it wouldn't be something I tried. It would be something I am doing, that I'm aware of. But pride says, oh, they gave me a way to defend myself and say, oh, I knew that, so it's okay. I was in the right, I knew I was. And now, nothing has happened, has it? We've just gone on with our dream. We had a chance at discovery, And in our vanity and pride, we threw it away. We had a chance to wake up out of the dream and get a little shock that could have given us the energy to go on doing this, and we threw it away because it upset vanity. So the difficulty is that we think that if we don't hold on to vanity, then we will not be deserving of our greed. And so we'll never get what we want out of life. That's our justification for saying, I have a right and deserve to get everything that I want out of life. Because look at me. Wouldn't you give it to me? And every flaw that I have, I know about. And I'm working on them diligently. That makes me oh so deserving of all of life's goodies. That's a part of vanity too. The part that you call seeing fault with self is part of vanity. Because when do you ever see fault with self and not work to improve? That's what makes you so deserving of your greed. You're not here like the rest of us to find spirit in the midst of all of this learning and to see what it is to evolve. You're here to get your sensations gratified. It's not really a very noble thing, is it? You kind of look at yourself and see that all you ever cared about is whether or not your hungers are gratified. That everything that you've ever done has been to gratify some hunger, even though vanity paints a lovely picture of it that says, oh, notice for very noble reasons. Yeah, take away the good feeling it gives you and we'll see how long you do it, if it's so noble. I know how people feel about noble things. Oh, they just get such a lovely, warm, quivery feeling inside about themselves, don't they? What if that feeling were there? Would you still be noble? So vanity is our most prized possession. Because it says, I'm deserving of all the things that I'm greedy for. Of course, we don't call it greed. It's what I deserve out of life. I've worked hard. I deserve it. So every time one starts to defend self, when pride comes up, we can say, what is being defended here? What is believed about self that apparently is not true? If people call me stupid, I don't care. I know I'm not stupid. Yes,
You know, I know I'm not too, but I do find myself defending against the thought that somebody might, you know, I mean, I know I'm not stupid in what I'm going to do, but I'm very sensitive to anyone thinking that I might be, like if I'm a little bit sick or if I'm in any way not up to my total intellectual peak, I feel compelled to explain it to everybody so they won't think I'm stupid. Well, no, I'm not. It's not that I think I am, but I still do that.
Well, apparently you do. Apparently there's been a lot of conditioning throughout the years that said Laura's stupid.
No, there wasn't. There was never anything but Laura's a little genius. That's what I grew up with. I mean, I've never had any challenge to it from the outside.
Then you don't know it. It's in vanity.
Say it again?
You don't know it. It's
I
in
don't
vanity.
know what.
That you're smart. You're struggling to live up to that picture that everyone gave you.
It's true, I am. But I also know it's...
No, you don't. As long as it's in the conditioned behavior, it is not knowing. It's a distortion of perception. We've been through this. You know only the distortion of intelligence. I don't care if people call me stupid. That's one thing I'm very aware of, is that Philip is not stupid. He does stupid things many times. I'll be the first one to admit that. And there are some things that I have real trouble understanding. Certain technical areas that I just can't grasp. This mind doesn't work on those subjects. That doesn't make me stupid.
I actually don't really know it.
That's right. You believe it. And you're conforming to it. It is a part of vanity. If someone tells you that you're short without saying you ought to be tall, you ever had anybody do that? Just kind of offhandedly say you're short without any idea that it ought to be different? Maybe they even like the fact that you're short. Do you defend yourself for being short? No, because you know you're short. You may defend yourself when you feel like you're being attacked. Someone says, you ought to be tall, what's wrong with you? Although, I can't imagine doing that either, but I know a lot of people do that. They're very sensitive about it. You know you're short, right? Well, how do you care if people think you're short? You are. What difference does it make? There's nothing to defend there. It's known. I may have trouble dealing with literally being attacked, because I don't know how to love yet. But I don't have to present an image all the time that says, even though I'm short. You just don't do that. You don't walk around with a chip on your shoulder because you're short. Obviously, at some point or another, you said, I'm short, who cares? Lots of people in this world that like short women. The things that I don't actually know for myself, that are just in vanity, are always defended. That's part of the justification for my doubt and my greed. I'm smart, I deserve it.
So, it's really, I mean, in my case, I think all those things I got told about being smart and all the importance that got put on it keep me from knowing it.
That's right. That's right. Because being a smart person, I understand that every person has their own limitations. So there are times when I look stupid. That smart doesn't give you the ability to understand everything. It's always kind of, biased towards certain areas, the talents, the understanding that you have. And there are some subjects that I look real stupid in. Okay? I understand that. I don't expect myself to be able to do those well. I do the best that I can. Because I understand that there's some things that no matter how smart I am, I have real trouble with those things. I'm always amazed at people who don't have trouble with them. Because I can't see the trick of it. But it doesn't bother me. Sometimes I intentionally play stupid. It's very convenient to be stupid. Okay? Any questions or comments?
I have a belief that it should be clear right now.
Mike, you tell me that every damn fucking week. What do you want me to do about it? Open your head and pour it in?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, now that I can work with. A complaint I can't work with. This should be clearer. Oh, okay. What am I supposed to do? So what is it that you want me to do? What is it you want me to tell you that is not clear?
What to do?
What to do?
Well, I'm wanting to see the connections in this, and I have to do it for myself.
I'm sorry, what?
I was just saying that I'm wanting to understand more of this, and that's, I'm guessing that's what I've discovered is
You're guessing what you discovered?
No, I'm guessing that's what I have to discover, that I'll see more of the connections.
That's what you have to discover. That's true. You'll die if you don't. Boy, terrible things will happen if you don't discover it. Isn't have to the same thing as saying, I will die without this, I need it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that'll certainly make it easy to do. I don't have too much trouble getting food. But you know what? If I thought I was going to die in the next 3 minutes if I didn't get food, boy, would you see one hell of a mess. I probably wouldn't make it. I'd be too busy acting like a goofball idiot for believing it to get the food. You don't need to discuss anything. You don't have to. So what are you trying to say? Did you not understand the experiment?
I don't think I
Could you like say no?
did. No, I didn't.
Okay. Somebody tell me. I obviously can't tell me. I'm too stupid. Somebody else tell me in other words.
One part of the experiment with vanity was to start writing down the false picture of self. And one way to see that is when pride comes up to defend the picture of self, what is it defending? What is that picture that it's defending? That was one of the suggestions. The other one
Do you
was...
understand?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm stupid. Been a shitty teacher on top of it.
The other one was to take a sheet of paper, write down grade, and to look at the grade that's going on, what the senses that the body is saying need to be gratified.
Okay. Mike, could you have done this after the meeting?
Yes.
Why didn't you? What motivated you to do it now? When it was a very simple thing that you didn't understand the experiment that everyone else seems to have gotten since they didn't ask about that. What motivated you to do it now?
I'd ask questions before, after meetings, and you requested that I ask them during the meetings. So that's why I was honoring that request. That's why I did that. Which
So it's my fault.
no, I mean, I made the choice. I was just choosing to do that.
Or maybe you want attention. And you want to feel important. And it's got nothing to do with that. But that's called vanity and pride. Defending. Greed. And that is very much a decision called I am important. And one way I can prove how important I am is to be the stupidest person around, because I'm just so special, you know. I'm the most stupid person, and I need all this extra help. I just can't get it on my own. So maybe that was a demonstration of vanity and pride and greed. Mike does want a lot of special attention, doesn't he? Ooh, that machine just shut down. That's the experiment, okay? See what you're staring at right now that you can't deal with. See why you didn't want to get to experiment, Mike? This is a large part of the life, isn't it? You live in vanity most of the time. About how special you are. And how deserving of extra special care and treatment you are. Now everyone should pay attention to you. Everyone should help you out. Oh boy, is that a big one, isn't it? You deserve to be helped. Is that right?
Feels true.
I don't care if it feels true, I care if you see it. Everything feels true when you're being attacked. Or it feels false, okay? But that's the game, is to look at the stuff that you're kind of staring at right now and going, okay. It's running your life. It really is. Any questions or comments? Okay. Good experimenting.